Sean Great stalked northern Ohio between 2006 and 2016, slaughtering women after assaulting them. He's now on death row awaiting execution, thanks to one would-be victim's bravery. The following 911 call you're about to hear is of that would-be victim and is possibly one of the most tense 911 calls you'll ever hear. On September 13th, 2016, Ashland police received a phone call from an unknown woman who police referred to as Jane Doe, who whispered that she had been kidnapped and was tied up mere feet away from her sleeping abductor. She tried to describe the man who was holding her captive and the house she was in. The best she could manage was that it was next to the 4th Street laundromat.
What is the address to your emergency?
By the 4th Street laundromat.
What is it?
4th Street laundromat.
What's the problem?
I've been abducted.
Who abducted you?
Sean Green.
You said John Green?
Sean Great.
Where's he at now?
Asleep.
Where's he sleeping at?
In the bedroom.
In what bedroom?
There's 2 houses right by the laundry street. And it's in one of those houses.
What color's the house?
Yellow. Please hurry.
Is it an apartment?
No, it's a house.
Okay, does he own the house?
No, he broke into it.
Does anybody actually live there?
I think they've been abandoned.
Does he have a weapon?
He's got a taser.
Are you injured?
A little.
Where did he take you from?
My apartment. I was walking with him.
You were walking with him?
Mm-hmm.
Where were you walking to?
His place. I've known him for like a month and a half.
Is there any way you can get out of the building?
I don't know without waking him, and I'm scared.
Is there a bathroom in the house?
Well, his bedroom is closed, and he made it so it would make noise.
And if you told him you had to go to the bathroom, he would do something to you?
Yeah, because he had me tied up.
So are you tied up now?
Well, yeah, but I kind of freed myself.
Is he in the same room with you?
Yes.
Are you bleeding from anywhere?
Not anymore. Oh, shit. Oh, shit, I woke him up.
You just set the phone down.
While the 911 dispatcher continued talking the caller through escaping, Jane accidentally knocked over her captor's taser, waking him. The line went dead briefly, and she was suddenly minutes away from being the 6th victim of the serial killer Sean Great. And by this point, the police knew they had to race if they wanted any chance of saving the helpless woman. Great sat up in his bed and stared at the floor, before laying back down again, not realizing that Jane was on the phone with the police.
Are you still there?
I'm a stalker.
What?
I'm a stalker.
Do you hear any officers outside?
No.
Okay, they're in the area. Can you get out of the house?
Locked.
It's locked. Are you at the door?
Yeah, I am.
She's at the door.
What?
She's at the door on the right side of the house. She got out of the bedroom. Is there a window there?
Yeah, I'm looking out of it. Tell them to come back.
She said...
Hurry, hurry.
She said to hurry up and come back.
Yeah, they can see me if they come to it.
The door is locked.
Come on out, hurry up, get out of here. Where is he?
Bedroom sleeping.
Still sleeping?
Yeah.
Okay, they have her.
He's unarmed.
Unarmed?
Yeah.
Well, if you can't be in there, here, cover yourself up. Tell me what happened. What happened?
Their rescue of the woman and arrest of Great was heard on the call. Thankfully, the woman survived this ordeal, though likely not without having some lasting scarring effects on her. As a teenager growing up in Marion, Ohio, Sean Great was well liked, particularly by girls. He had a charm about him that would mask his inner rage, at least for a while. When he was 18, he was arrested for grabbing his then-girlfriend by the throat. A few years later, he was arrested for breaking into his 17-year-old girlfriend's home and choking her, and only 8 months later, he broke into the same girl's house again, this time slipping underneath her couch and hiding until he saw an opportunity to strike. This time he had a butcher knife in hand. But Great's charm and artificial friendliness allowed him to go on and have 3 children with 3 different women, but his inner anger would never lay dormant for long. His ex-wife, Amber Nicole Bowman, claims that Sean at one point said, "If I can't see my daughter, no one will." By his mid to late 20s, Great's behavior became more erratic. He would begin dating Christina Hildreth. The pair were happy and content in the beginning, but Great couldn't hide his true colors for long. Not only did he become violent, controlling, and jealous, he would also show signs of being cold and indifferent towards his confused girlfriend, and would eventually end up physically abusing her.
So was he violent with you?
Yes.
In what way?
He broke my hand, blacked my eye, strangled me, tied me up.
But his hostility would soon extend beyond just romantic partners, and even to friends, when he asked his friend for a loan, which was declined, and in response, he sent his friend a disturbing text saying, "Meet the other me." Eventually, Great would find himself living in Mansfield, hopping from woman to woman, and around this time, he met his first 2 victims, Rebecca Lisi and Candace Cunningham. Rebecca was a sex worker, and her body was found in March 2015. Her death was ruled an overdose originally, but Great later pleaded guilty to her murder. Candace Cunningham lived with Great in Mansfield before her disappearance in 2015. Police couldn't find her until the day of Great's arrest, when he led police to her body, which was lying behind a burned-down house in Richland County on the day of his arrest. Great managed to somehow become even more barbaric towards his next and final victim, Jane, who you heard in the phone call just before. Jane met Sean Great around her apartment complex, and he eventually gained her trust. That was when he exposed her to his true self. He trapped her in an abandoned house and forced her to endure days of torture and other unspeakable things while she was tied up. Great barely slept on the first night of his victim's capture, giving her no chance of escape. However, after another day of torture, Great eventually passed out. His phone was right next to him going off, but he was seemingly in a very deep sleep. So Jane took this opportunity as her likely last chance to escape alive, and she reached over his sleeping body as stealthily as she could to pick up the phone and dialed 911 while still partially bound. And that was the start of the 911 call. When police arrived at the property, they were met with more bodies than they'd expected. Great had been mercilessly killing the women who were unfortunate enough to trust him, and some of them were decomposing in the house he was squatting in. The 911 operator received a lot of hate and ridicule over her loud voice and constant seemingly unnecessary questions during the call, as many people believe she could have very easily led to Great being awoken, either by the sound of her voice or because of all the questions she was making Jane answer. Thankfully, things went the way they did, and this 911 call was a very fortunate story, as it got a monster off the streets who no doubt wouldn't have stopped doing what he was doing. The call you're about to hear was made by millionaire James Bob Ward, reporting that he had just shot his wife. His tone throughout the call is very monotone, calm, and nonchalant considering the matter for which he's making the call. The real estate mogul claims he walked into his and his wife's room to turn in for the night, and was shocked to find his allegedly depressed and intoxicated 51-year-old wife, Diane, holding his Magnum handgun. Bob says the weapon accidentally discharged while he was struggling to get it away from her before she could kill herself or him, or the both of them. This was the call.
Yeah, what's the emergency?
I just shot my wife.
You just what?
I just shot my wife.
Where's your wife?
She's right here on the floor. Please send somebody at 5277 Iowa Country Club Drive.
Okay, what's going on there?
I just shot my wife.
You just shot your wife?
I shot my wife, yes, please send somebody over.
Stay on my woman. Let me add the fire department. Don't hang up.
I will.
Where's the weapon at, sir?
Orange County Fire Rescue. The address of your emergency?
44.
5277 Iowa Country Club Drive.
On there.
I just shot my wife.
Okay, where's the weapon?
It's in
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Where, is she breathing?
No, she's dead.
You know that for sure.
I think so, yes.
Okay, sir, where is the weapon?
It's in the nightstand next to the bed in the master bedroom. And I'll be glad to meet the officers at the front door.
Where is your wife, sir?
She's in the floor in the master bedroom.
How old is she?
Born in 1954.
Okay, you're sure she's not breathing, or?
She's dead. She's done. I'm sorry.
Sir, did you purposely do this?
No.
Or was it an accident?
It was an accident.
How long ago did this happen, sir?
Probably 5 minutes ago. I'm on the front steps.
You're out on the front steps?
Yeah, I'm on the front steps.
Okay.
I'm leaving the front gate from the front steps. We'll go upstairs and go find Diane. Yeah, they're passing. You told me back up.
Did you see the deputy?
Yeah, I see lights, but they're somewhere back up. Ask them back up. Hey, guys, over here. Over here. Guys, over here. Hey, you're on the phone. I'm making the front stop. No, I got him on the phone. We're good.
We can hang up. We're with him.
Okay.
Bob was charged with second-degree murder of Diane. He has always claimed the gun went off when he was trying to get it away from Diane, but prosecutors believe the two were arguing over financial problems, and that's why Bob shot her. Now it was up to a jury to decide, but to this day the question is, was Diane Ward's death really just a tragic accident, or did her husband Bob murder her in cold blood? Well, not too long ago, a significant discovery of a letter from the grave may finally answer the question that's confounded the justice system and haunted the Ward family since the day Diane died. Bob and Diane had it all, a happy 26-year-old marriage, 2 daughters, and enough money to own numerous luxurious estates in several states. Daughters Sarah and Mallory say they and their parents were a loving, tight-knit family. But eventually, Bob's real estate empire collapsed under the weight of the Great Recession, and even though Bob was facing bankruptcy, his daughters claimed he remained optimistic. But not Diane, who grew increasingly low-spirited over the prospect of losing the family fortune. Sarah said her mother vainly tried to ease her depression with booze and prescription drugs, and that she would turn into a different person far from the loving mom she knew, and completely out of control even in public. She said her mother was also directing all her anger and resentment at her father, after having to cut back on some of the luxuries the family grew used to, and Sarah says her father was like her mother's punching bag. Bob's defense attorneys painted Diane as a suicidal and unstable person, and in 2018, his defense attorneys produced new evidence. A suicide note written by Diane was found in the couple's Atlanta home. It was reportedly found by an estate sales professional in the closet in the master bedroom. She stated that she was on a ladder in a small closet in the bedroom when she noticed a pink notebook next to some hair rollers. She opened the notebook and found a note and some cards with Diane Ward printed on them. The alleged suicide note read, "Dear Mallory and Sarah, please know how much I love you. I don't know how it happened for me to end up like this. I want you to have wonderful lives and know that I will always be watching out for both of you. Take care of Daddy. I love you more than you will ever know. Take care of the dogs, they will need you." Defense attorneys claim that a former FBI handwriting expert could testify that he thinks the handwriting is indeed that of Diane Ward. So this all begs the question, is what Bob says true? Was his shooting of his wife an accident? But if this were the case, Bob's calm and seemingly unaffected tone over the phone with 911, and even during his police interrogation, wouldn't make much sense.
Then you're doing it rather
Any
than...
reading glasses anybody has?
Sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I have my pair.
Thank you.
I may have...
I have a folding pair, but I think they took them. Thank you.
Oh.
Well, like I said, I'm Detective Frost. I didn't get your name, your first name.
I go by Bob.
Okay.
But it's James Robert.
It would be a safe assumption that anyone who just accidentally murdered their wife would show any kind of remorse or regret, but Bob was calm and seemingly unaffected throughout. He's still in prison today. This last one has been circulating the internet for decades, and you've likely heard it before. In fact, I've included it in a video I privated many years ago. I'm sure some of you remember. But new information has arisen on this call recently.
This is Ruth Price of 3877.
What's the problem, ma'am?
Oh, well, there's some guy been checking the place out.
How?
Well, he went in the back. I have an apartment in the back, and he said he was looking for a guy. And he comes to my door, and
Yeah?
and said he's looking for an apartment. So I live alone, and I'm an old lady.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of
Where is he now, ma'am?
I don't have no idea.
For the longest time, this phone call was commonly just referred to as things like old woman murdered during 911 call. For a long time, people speculated that this call is just a hoax or a choreographed recording for 911 operator training. Eventually, though, the woman's name was revealed to be Ruth Price, and it was learned that the call was in fact real. However, the internet was still having a hard time gathering any further information on this Ruth Price woman, or what her fate was after the phone call. The unfortunate assumption that she was murdered shortly after this call was always the go-to assumption. At the beginning of the call, Ruth begins to give her address as 3877, but is cut off by the 911 operator. During this 911 call, Ruth presents herself as an elderly woman who's concerned about a man who knocks on her door saying he's looking for an apartment. Ruth pauses after giving this information. Then you hear a blood-curdling scream, and Ruth says something about not being able to breathe. Recently, though, information as to who this Ruth Price woman was finally surfaced. Ruth Mildred Starr was born in Pueblo, Colorado on December 7, 1913. Ruth went to Central High School in Pueblo, Colorado, and this was her yearbook photo. Ruth's obituary was recently found, which shows that she died in 1994 in the San Diego Union Tribune. Ruth was also mentioned in a newspaper section called Assaults on November 3, 1980 in the San Diego Evening Tribune. In this newspaper clipping, it says Ruth M. Price was assaulted on the 3800 block of 35th Street.
This is Ruth Price of 3877.
This newspaper clipping which you see here fits the Ruth Price 911 call perfectly. It wasn't a hoax, and it wasn't a 911 training call. That blood-curdling scream was unfortunately very real. But fortunately, even in Ruth's old age, she managed to fight off her attacker and live for another 14 years. What seems like a realistic possibility now is that this call was used to shock trainees for 911 call taking because of how blood-curdling and disturbing her panicked screaming was, and thus was born the legend of an old woman brutally murdered while on the phone with 911. At least this story had a much happier ending than originally thought. I was house sitting for my grandma one weekend while she went to Florida with some of her church friends. I was sleeping in the guest bedroom next to her room. The guest bedroom always had 2 twin beds inside of it that my brother and I would sleep in when we had sleepovers at her house. I took the bed next to the window, but before getting into bed, I checked all the doors making sure they were locked. When I did get into bed, it was early, and I didn't actually go to sleep for a while. There wasn't much to do at my grandma's house. I was just on my phone for an hour or two, watching videos, texting people, whatever. That's when I thought I could start hearing someone's voice outside. It sounded like a woman's voice, saying hello. I left the bedroom and inched my way closer to the front door, moving slow because I was trying to listen.
Hello?
It was a woman's voice, just going hello like every 10 seconds. As I got closer to the front door, I realized that's where it seemed to be coming from. My grandma's door doesn't have a peephole, but the windows in her dining room gave a clear view of the front porch, so I went over to that window to attempt to get a view of who was out there. I tried peeking my head in between the plastic blinds without making it obvious, but I guess I didn't do a good job of that. because when I looked, I did see a woman on my grandma's stoop, and she was looking right at me, as if she knew I was going to be looking through those blinds. Once again, she said hello, with some freakish smile on her face. This woman was older, but don't picture her as some innocent-looking, small old lady. She looked like she was maybe late 50s, early 60s, and something about her face just skeeved me out. I moved away from the window and thought maybe it was one of my grandma's friends. It was midnight, though. Why would anyone come to the door this late? And why wouldn't she knock or ring the bell? Why was she just standing out there going hello over and over? I was genuinely unsettled. I just went back to the guest bedroom and shut the door. Now with the door shut as opposed to before, I couldn't hear that woman anymore. Maybe it was that, or she just decided to leave. I started texting everyone about it, my sisters, my friends, telling them how bizarre it was. But a good amount of time passed in silence, and I was starting to calm down. My sisters were telling me to call Grandma, but there was a 0% chance she was awake, and she barely ever even checked her cell phone anyway. Just like that, something broke the silence. A banging at the window. Not a knocking or tapping, banging. I felt that fierce pain in my chest area as my body entered that fight or flight mode. Shortly after the banging stopped, I heard that familiar voice say hello. With that boost of adrenaline, I guess I had the extra confidence to grab the blind and push it up. There I was, face to face with this horrifying older lady, with only a thin layer of glass between us. I screamed at her smiling, gross face, "I'm calling the cops." I pulled the blind back down and ran back outside to the living room. I looked around the house, then ran upstairs to box myself into the upstairs guest bedroom. I didn't want to actually call the cops. I don't know why. I wanted to just wait it out. I crawled into the bed in the upstairs guest bedroom and tucked myself under the covers. A couple hours later, I was still awake, and I finally only then went back downstairs to look outside each window. That freaky old lady seemed to be gone. The next morning, I called my grandma and told her what happened. She started yelling into the phone, clearly panicking and distressed. She told me how a few days earlier, she was being watched in the grocery store by some woman about 10 years younger than her, who just kept smiling at her for no reason. I told her to calm down. I didn't entirely know whether to correlate the two or not, but when we eventually got off the phone with each other, I did have to give it a second thought. My grandma is 75, and she has lost a bit of her wits, so I do have to take some of the things she says with a grain of salt. But the way she yelled into the phone about the woman in the store really gave me the chills, and I still wonder if it could have been the same person. My name is Nicholas. I'm currently a freshman at Syracuse University, which doesn't exactly sit in the safest area. I just went through a breakup with my first girlfriend, so I started getting back into the online dating scene. I was using the app Hinge when I found some blonde girl named Stephanie who I really connected with. She also went to Syracuse. We both liked to read, go to the movies, we even had the same sense of humor. I suggested we go on a movie date, and she said she'd love to. She told me to meet her at some specific point near campus and she'd pick me up. So, around 9 o'clock, I waited on some corner of a normal neighborhood block, waiting for Stephanie. She asked me to share my location with her, and so I did. A few minutes later, I saw a car turn down the street and start approaching me. Then it stopped in front of me, and the driver rolled down the window. It wasn't Stephanie, though, but some old random guy. He asked what I was doing alone out here, which was insanely weird first of all. Then I said I was waiting for someone. He asked if I was waiting for Stephanie, and I said, yeah, how'd you know? He said he was Stephanie's father, and told me to hop in so he could give me a ride to her. I took a good look at him, and he looked a little old to be her father, to be honest. I'm no idiot when it comes to sketchy situations, so I said in a firm voice, why didn't you tell me you'd be picking me up? He claimed he didn't trust a random guy meeting up with his daughter, and wanted to meet me first. I took another good look at the man and didn't say anything. I simply started walking away in the opposite direction from where his car was facing. He started yelling hey hey, sounding surprised that I was just walking away like that, but I've heard way too many kidnapping stories to know where this could potentially go. I heard the guy's car moving, and I turned to make sure he wasn't doing a U-turn to follow me. I breathed a sigh of relief when he drove straight and turned left out of sight. I continued walking down the block towards campus. I got to the corner of the block and was just about to make a turn when I noticed what I was pretty sure to be the same car the man was driving, just parked on the side of the road with the light shut off. I briefly tried looking into the window as I passed, but the glass was tinted. I tried not making it obvious that I was suspicious and continued walking. I got a text from this so-called Stephanie person saying, "Why didn't you get in the car with my dad?" I ignored the text and continued walking. I kept looking back to see if the car would move. When I got to an intersection in the road, I turned right and then full-on booked it in the direction of campus. Surprisingly, I wasn't followed. I made it back to campus out of breath and started walking to my dorm building. I felt like I heard footsteps following me though. I thought maybe I was being paranoid, but when I heard a piece of broken glass being kicked by someone's shoe, I knew I was being tailed. I made a point of ducking down behind a van and stopping to give me time to listen for where the footsteps were coming. They were a few cars away from me. Then I remembered. I never stopped sharing my location with Stephanie, or should I say that man. I saw him. It was that old man. He was approaching from between two cars across from me. He yelled something that I didn't fully understand, but it sounded like he said, "Come back and I'll take you to her." He had to be like 60-something. There's no way he would catch me if I sprinted. I lost him easily when I ran, and made it back to my dorm room. My roommate wasn't there, so I had no one to talk to about it. But when I lay in my bed, I got another text from that man, and it was shocking. It said, "You're a little piece of fucking shit. You're lucky you got away. I would have strangled your ugly ass." I still have the screenshot. I replied saying thanks for the threat, it's going straight to the police, and I blocked his number. I still have the conversation saved as evidence, and I plan on going to the police with it eventually. Hopefully they are able to do something about it. When I was 18, I had a side job as a part-time janitor at my high school over the summer. I would work sometimes days and sometimes nights, anywhere from 9 a.m. to 12 a.m., depending on how much money I needed. Oftentimes, I would be left to lock up the building when the older janitors have left. This was a time before the high school had cameras installed in every single hallway. So one night, one of my superiors, Tom, had to leave early, meaning I'd be finishing up the rest of my shift alone, and I'd be locking up for the night. He told me text him if I need anything, as he always did, and then he left. I loved it when I was left alone because usually I'd just do half an hour of work and then just hang around on my phone or leave early and still get paid for the whole shift. I definitely pushed it with the things I'd get away with at that place. One of the things Tom asked me to do before leaving was bring all the extra seats in the gymnasium from the assembly down to the basement storage room. So I figured I'd do that, then just go home. I grabbed a stack of 6 chairs and started carrying it down to the basement. The lights in the storage room were very dim. They kind of suck. The whole basement of that school wasn't exactly pretty. It felt more like a basement to a warehouse. Anyway, there were what appeared to be a bunch of art mannequins covered by paint cloths. You know, those big things that look like blankets. It seemed all the school's art supplies were stored down here. I dropped a stack of chairs down where the rest of the chairs were stored, and went back up to the gym to get more. When I came back down with more chairs, I noticed one of the mannequins was exposed now. The blanket was removed from on top of it. I know for sure it was covered minutes earlier because it was one of the front ones. I texted Tom saying, "I think someone's down in the basement." He said back, "What do you mean?" And I said one of the art cloths were moved. He took a minute to respond saying no one else should be there. Then I noticed something. The art cloth, tucked in the corner of the storage room, sitting outside of the light that was produced at the center of the room. It was covering something, surely. I started to tiptoe over to it, but when I was a few feet away from it, I realized whatever was under that cloth was moving just ever so slightly. There was undoubtedly someone hiding under there. I ran back upstairs and locked the basement door. I texted Tom saying someone is hiding under a cloth in the basement.
He said call the cops, but I insisted he just come back since he only just left like 10 minutes ago. He didn't want to come back though. He told me to be a man and confront whoever was down there. So I went down to the basement again. However, the cloth was now strewn flat on the floor, and whoever was hiding under there was gone. But possibly the scariest thing was yet to happen. As I stood in the storage room, there were loud metallic thumps coming from above my head. I looked up and saw indents slowly forming in the large air vent above me. Someone was crawling through the main vent, then just stopped literally above me. And then, bangs. Bangs like whoever was in there was trying to break open the floor of the air vent. I didn't know what was happening, but I was officially done with this. I ran up the stairs, locked up the school, and went home. I told Tom the partial truth the next day, that I thought I saw someone in the corner and it was gone when I went back. And I claimed there was nothing else I could say. Thank God it was my last week there, so it wasn't my concern anymore.
I wouldn't call myself a very active person, but I do enjoy working out and running every now and then, to stay in somewhat good shape. My friend Jay and I usually work out and run together, as Jay is always in shape and kind of trains me, if you will. Jay and I would often run late at night in my neighborhood since most of it is well lit, and I live in a decent area. However, we stopped running in my neighborhood 2 months ago after this happened. The way my neighborhood is laid out is that there's a main road that connects to separate roads branching off, but ultimately they all connect back to the main road, which leads to a dirt path extending into local farms and larger properties. This is important to understand the situation Jay and I were in. One night, we decided to run from my house onto a path that goes through the woods to one of the roads that branches off from the main road in my neighborhood. We planned to use that road to reconnect to the main road, then continue running to the dirt path before heading back to my house using the main road. I know it sounds confusing, but we took this unusual route to maximize the miles we could run, as our usual path, just running on the main road and back, was getting too easy for us. The run started as usual, with Jay and me running from my house to the path, talking about high school drama as we ran. However, we soon began to hear footsteps behind us. At first, we didn't think much of it since the path we were running on was frequently used, and we often saw other runners or people using it to cross from one area to another in the neighborhood. But as we continued, the footsteps remained behind us, mirroring our speed. When we picked up the pace and ran quickly, the footsteps followed suit. When we slowed down to a jog or walk for a moment, so did they. At this point, Jay and I were obviously a bit nervous and freaked out, but we were almost to the well-lit road. When we finally exited the path onto the road, we looked back and saw no one behind us. We both exchanged the same what the f*** look and decided it was probably just another runner trying to keep their distance from us. We continued onto the side road that led to the main road of my neighborhood and followed the main road all the way to where it turned into the dirt path. At this point, we were both still feeling good and decided to push on, running further down the dirt path. However, unlike the main road, this path had no streetlights and was lined with trees, creating an ominous atmosphere at night. Jay and I ran about a mile down this road before deciding to turn back. As we turned, I caught a glimpse of a dark figure quickly darting into the trees on the left side of the road. This immediately reminded me of the footsteps from earlier, and I began to feel noticeably uneasy. I told Jay that I had seen a figure jump into the trees along the path that we needed to take back. He dismissed it, saying I was just being paranoid and seeing things because of how far we'd run. I almost believed him and started doubting myself, so we began making our way back to my house. We ran past the spot where I had seen the figure with no issues, but just as we were about to reach the main road again, we heard rustling about 20 feet behind us in the trees. We turned around and saw a figure standing in the middle of the dirt road. The figure was facing away from us and was dressed in a black hoodie, along with very ripped and dirty khaki pants and black shoes. At this moment, I was more scared than I had ever been in my life. It felt like my heart was going to fly out of my chest. It was beating that hard. Jay looked at me, then back at the figure, and said, "What the hell are you doing?" But stopped mid-sentence when we both heard the person start laughing. It was an awful, cackling, cringe-inducing laugh. Then, as we stood frozen, the person turned to look at us, still laughing, before suddenly stopping. Now, he just stared at us with a glare that still haunts me to this day. His wide eyes and pale face burned into my memory. Jay and I exchanged one last look before running faster than we had ever run in our lives, sprinting the entire 2 miles back to my house. As we ran, we heard that terrible laugh again behind us, which only made us run faster. When we finally got back to my house, I threw up, then rushed inside through the back door, locking every entrance and shutting my garage doors. We sat there panting, still processing what had just happened, and swore never to run in my neighborhood at night again. If you're a night runner, always stay in well-lit areas and bring a friend, just to be safe. As a high school junior, I ran cross country and track, and I loved running alone. I wasn't the fastest on my team, but I had endurance and could lose myself in the rhythm of my feet hitting the ground. A woman in a quiet rural neighborhood near a forest preserve had hired me to run her hyperactive puppy, Izzy. She'd pay me $10 per run. It seemed like an easy gig. Izzy needed the exercise, and I got a little extra money while training. The area had scattered houses, abandoned farms, a cemetery, and the remnants of a disbanded cult commune. My parents had always warned me about running alone in secluded areas, but I figured I was fast enough to outrun anything dangerous. That changed one evening. It was just before dusk when I took Izzy out for a longer run. The setting sun cast a deep orange glow over the treetops, but shadows stretched across the road, making everything feel darker than it should have been. The only sounds were my breathing, Izzy's panting, and the rhythmic thud of my running shoes against the pavement. Occasionally, a bird would flutter in the trees or a distant dog would bark, but otherwise it was eerily quiet. The farther I ran, the quieter it got, as if the world was slowly emptying itself of sound. About 2 miles in, we reached a stretch of road flanked by thick forest on both sides. That's when Izzy suddenly stopped. Her ears perked, and she stared into the woods, completely still. A low whimper escaped her throat. I followed her gaze. At first, I saw nothing but the dense trees, branches swaying slightly in the breeze. But then, between 2 trunks, a man's face peeked out from behind a tree. He was short, maybe in his 30s, wearing a hat pulled low over his face, a thick jacket despite the mild weather, and gloves. His eyes were locked on me, unblinking. His stillness unnerved me, but I told myself he was probably just a hiker or a hunter. Still, something about the way he stood, like half hidden, watching silently, it sent a chill down my spine. His presence felt off, like he wasn't just some guy passing through, but something wrong, something that shouldn't have been there at all. I gave him a polite nod, trying to appear unfazed, and I started to jog again. My heart was beating a little faster now, and not from the run. A few steps later, Izzy stopped again, her body rigid, tail between her legs. My stomach dropped as I turned back. The man had moved closer. He wasn't behind the tree anymore. He was standing right at the tree line, just feet from the road, still staring. His head was tilted slightly now, as if studying me. A sickening realization crept in. He wanted me to know he had moved. He wanted me to notice. I felt something cold slip down my spine. My body was instinctively preparing to run, but I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe he was just some weirdo trying to mess with me. Maybe if I ignored him, he'd get bored. I kept running, trying to stay composed, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. At first, I thought he was gone. The woods looked empty again. But then, just as I turned forward, I caught movement in my peripheral vision. I turned back, and he was sprinting toward me. He had a butcher cleaver. A choked scream got caught in my throat as pure, unfiltered terror exploded through my body. I didn't think, I just ran. Adrenaline shot through me like electricity, and I pushed myself harder than I ever had in a race. My breath came in ragged gasps, Izzy struggling to keep up, her leash jerking in my grip as we tore down the road. I had never known fear like this before, a kind of fear that exists deep in the bones, a kind that tells you you're gonna die if you slow down. I glanced back only once. He was still chasing me. His face was twisted in pure rage, his mouth slightly open as if growling. The gleam of the blade catching the last rays of sunlight. He wasn't just running. He was running erratically, his arms flailing in unnatural motions, his legs moving almost too fast, like something that wasn't used to running at all. That's when I realized he wasn't breathing. I could hear my own frantic gasps. I could hear Izzy panting. I could even hear the distant rustling of the trees, but not him. His footsteps thundered behind me, his pace matching mine, but there was no sound of breath, just that awful silence beneath the pounding of his boots. I reached a neighborhood and sprinted between the houses, zigzagging through yards hoping to lose him. My vision was blurring, my legs were screaming, but I couldn't stop. I darted behind a shed with Izzy. Finally, when I was sure we had put enough distance between us, I pressed myself against the rough wooden wall, gripping my knees, gasping for breath. Silence. I swallowed hard, my heartbeat still hammering in my ears. Slowly, I turned my head. At the top of the hill, he stood, watching. The cleaver dangled from his hand, his chest rising and falling as if he had just stopped running too, but he wasn't chasing anymore. He was just standing there, staring. We locked eyes. His face had no emotion now, no rage, just that blank, unsettling gaze, as if he had simply lost interest. A minute passed, then another. A car's headlights appeared in the distance, beams cutting through the dark, and just like that, he turned and walked back into the woods. No hesitation, no hurry, just gone. I didn't move for a long time. When I finally did, I took the longest route back to the woman's house, sneaking through the yard so I wouldn't be visible on the main road. My hand shook as I took my payment, acting like nothing had happened. I didn't tell her. I didn't tell my parents. I knew if I did, they would never let me run alone again. I don't know who he was. I don't know if he was part of the old cults, a drifter, or something else entirely. But I do know one thing. I never ran in that direction again. This is a story spanning nearly 7 years, so I will try to be as straightforward and to the point as possible. I live in a suburban neighborhood surrounded by rural countryside. There's nothing but open fields and winding country roads around it, and it's practically impossible to get anywhere without a car. It is a very beautiful place, but very secluded. As a result, I often feel confined here, which has only gotten worse during quarantine. The first time I remember seeing something suspicious was when I was 9 years old. My little brother and I, who was 7 at the time, were taking our dogs down towards the front of our street, near the main road. We were casually talking and not paying much attention to what we were doing. Suddenly, we heard somebody call to us, "Hey, come here." A big, white SUV was parked at the start of our street, and a man was sticking his hand out the window, motioning for us to come over. I remember distinctly that it was a tall white guy with curly blonde hair. My little brother started to walk his way, but I stopped him. I'm a very paranoid person, and I'd heard all the horror stories about kids being lured into vans, never to be seen again. I led us off in the other direction, back to our house, while also keeping an eye on the guy in the car. When he saw that we were leaving, he turned his car around and drove off. Upon arriving home, I told my mom about it, but she dismissed it, saying he was probably just going to ask us for directions or something like that. It scared me a little at the time, but I didn't think much of it until now. A year later, during Halloween of 2014, another incident happened. A black sedan was apparently following trick-or-treaters down the street. When a parent approached it, it tried to run them over before driving away and out of sight. To make matters worse, the license plates appeared to have been taken off. I didn't see any of this myself, but some of the adults in the neighborhood had made a big stink about it, and I was given yet another "don't talk to strangers" lecture. People were especially sensitive about this kind of thing at the time since the murder of Hannah Graham had recently taken place in my area. Fast forward another 4 years to summer break in 2018. Some neighbors of ours were out of town on vacation, and they asked me if I could pet sit for them while they were away. I had to go by 3 times a day to let their dog out, once in the morning around 8 a.m., once in the afternoon after lunch, and once in the evening at 9. Their house sits to the right of our neighborhood, off the main road. To get there from my house, I can go to the end of my street and take a right, or I can cut through the woods and into their backyard. Going through the woods is faster, but the brush is very dense and the trees are close together, so I usually would just go along the street. One night, wrapped up in a session of COD with my friends, I forgot to let the dog out. When I remembered, it was past 10, and I rushed over, worried that he might pee on the floor inside. It was pitch black out, and I couldn't see anything but the beam of my flashlight and the glowing stars in the sky. Luckily, the dog had been able to hold it, so I let him out as usual. After he went, I brought him back in and was prepared to leave again when I looked out the window and saw a black sedan parked next to the driveway. This made me uncomfortable since I was pretty sure it wasn't there when I first showed up at the house. There were no other houses nearby, and I knew for a fact that the owners weren't coming back for another few days. After debating what I should do for a few minutes, I finally decided to go back and cut through the woods. I did so, and got back without issue. To play it safe, I cut through the woods for the rest of my time pet sitting, but I never saw the black car again. Now, these occurrences alone would not be enough to merit a story, but it's what happened recently that really terrifies me and makes me question whether these events might actually be connected. I run for the track team at my school, and since quarantine had prevented us from having practice, I go running every day on the roads around my house. My street isn't very long, so I often run off the main road and other connecting ones. For the first few months, everything was going fine. I would jog around for an hour, taking in the scenery and exploring the various different country lanes. But about a month ago, I was running back home on the main road when I noticed that a car seemed to be following me. I always run on the left side of the road going towards traffic. This is so that if a car comes up behind me on a blind curve or in an area with low visibility, it won't hit me from behind where I can't see. The car, coincidentally a large white SUV, was on the other side of the road, going about the same speed I was jogging. This was especially odd because there aren't many cars on that road, and you can go much faster than on a busy one. Unsure of its intentions, I turned down a small side street with a cul-de-sac at the end. It didn't follow, so I ran down to the circle and went back home. However, the next day, it followed me again. This time, I saw it sitting at the start of a driveway, and it pulled out after me once I passed it. Like the day before, it followed me for about a mile before I turned down the same street, where it promptly drove off. This continued. Every day for a 10-day period, it followed me. At first, I thought that it might be going somewhere on a schedule that just happened to coincide with my runs. To test this theory, I decided to run an hour later than I usually did. The first day I tried this, it wasn't there. The next day, though, I was disturbed to see that it was once again following right behind me. This definitely unnerved me, but I was hesitant to tell my parents because I was worried they'd forbid me from running. Furthermore, it hadn't attempted to do anything yet, so I decided I could put up with it as long as I was careful and watched it closely. On the 11th day of being followed, I turned down the side street to see a black sedan sitting at the end. At first, I thought nothing of it. There were a few houses on the street, and it likely belonged to somebody who lived there. But as I began to get closer, I noticed something odd. Underneath the car, barely visible, was the silhouette of a person. They barely fit and were huddled on the far side to avoid being seen. I immediately got chills and ran off in the other direction, looking over my shoulder to make sure they stayed put. To make matters worse, I saw that white SUV, which usually drove away, was sitting at the top of the street, penning me in. I was feeling panicky now, and decided that I preferred the evil I knew to the one that I didn't, so I picked up the pace and tried to sprint by the SUV. When I was within a few feet of it, a man jumped out and ran after me. I easily outpaced him, and thank God that my months of training had paid off. When it became clear he couldn't catch me, he yelled at me to come back and said he just wanted to talk. I responded with 2 fingers, if you catch my drift, and I sprinted the remaining mile back to my house. I finally broke down and told my mom.
who got me on the phone with the police. Sadly though, since I didn't get a license plate, there wasn't much they could do. They promised that they would look into it, but as far as I can tell, nothing has been done. These experiences have haunted me for the past couple of weeks, and with all my spare time, I've had a lot of time to contemplate the situation. After connecting the dots, it's clear to me that these men have been trying for multiple years to kidnap a child from our street. There are quite a lot of children in my neighborhood, which explains why they frequent it so often. It worries me that somebody less cautious than myself might find themselves in a similar situation and fall prey to these predators. I still have nightmares about the man who chased me down the street. He was very tall with blonde curls, the same man who tried to abduct me when I was 9 years old.
After breaking up with my first girlfriend when I was 21, I had been single for about a year. It was the first time I had been single in years, so it took some getting used to again. Eventually I decided it was time to get back into the dating scene, so I started downloading a bunch of dating apps. One of the apps I downloaded was OkCupid, which was the one I used the most. I vibed the most with one girl I matched with named Brenna. Based on her interests and biography, she was into a lot of things I was into. She was a very pretty, light-skinned black girl. We had talked for a while and agreed that I would pick her up at her place to go out and get food. I pulled up to her house on the west side of town at 6:30. It was about 10 minutes after sunset, so it was really getting dark. I texted Brenna, and she took a while to answer. I sat in my car actually staring at the conversation for a while, waiting for the texting bubble to come up. When it finally did, she responded saying, "Hey, sorry about that. My brother's gonna meet you outside. He's being really annoying and protective." I showed her how upset I was and how much I didn't want to have to meet her brother, but she just kept saying, "Sorry, he's forcing me." I saw the front door of the house I was parked in front of open, and a guy came out walking over to the driveway while looking at my car. I got out to go over and meet him, realizing he towered over me. Another thing I quickly noted was his skin was significantly more dark than Brenna's, to the point that they wouldn't even seem related at all. He shook my hand and introduced himself as Will. There didn't seem to be anything off-putting about him at first glance, and he seemed friendly enough. He started going on about how he just wanted to make sure a trustworthy, stand-up guy was about to take out his sister. We talked for a little, and he seemed normal enough, I guess. He finally asked me to come inside to meet Brenna. He led me into the house and shut the door behind me. He told me to wait right there in the living room while he went upstairs to get Brenna. As he went upstairs, I looked into the living room to realize there were two men sitting on the couch, both giving me a certain kind of look I just didn't like. I said what's up to them. One of them just slightly nodded his head, but just barely. Will from upstairs called down that he's trying to find Brenna, which was odd. I turned to look at the room adjacent to the living room, which was the dining room. To my surprise, there was another man sitting at the dining room table, also staring at me. Instinctively, I stepped back and reached for the doorknob without even turning my back to the three men. One of them screamed, "Grab him," as they saw me reach for the door. At that point, I flung the door open and ran to my car. They weren't far behind. In fact, I made it into my car with only maybe a second to spare before they were outside my doors, kicking and hitting my windows, trying to break them. I was able to drive away down the block, but keep in mind this was on a public residential road. I have no idea how it didn't cause more of a scene out on the street. I made it home to tell my mom and dad what happened, still out of breath. They were in shock and almost didn't believe it, and they recommended I call the police. I did. I reported the house and the incident to the police. One of the neighbors vouched for my story anonymously because they saw the group attacking my car when I escaped. Police arrested 3 of the 4 men I saw in the house, one of them being Will, or whatever his real name was. The other guy couldn't be found or identified. I didn't stop using dating apps after that. I was just a lot more cautious from there on.
At the time of this story, I had already met a total of 3 people on Match.com. It didn't really work out with 2 of them, and the third one I dated for 4 months. After my breakup, I wanted to take a break from commitment and just find something more casual. And so I matched with a girl named Kylie, who I got along with decently well on the app. She seemed down to just come over to my apartment and hang out for the night. She showed up about half an hour later and seemed really quiet in person. We hung out in my room in the upstairs of my apartment for most of the night. We just talked for a while watching TV in the background. There were a bunch of awkward silences, but I did my best to fill them with new conversations. In the back of my mind the whole time I was thinking, are we gonna kiss? Does she expect me to move in for the kiss? How do I go about it? But hours of talking later, I started to realize there was something wrong with this girl. She became increasingly more emotionless. She was staring off across the room as she'd talk slowly, talking about increasingly deep and dark things. Then she said something surprising. She thanked me for allowing her to sleep over. Apparently, when I said she could come hang out for the night, she meant to literally stay the night. She got off the bed and asked what blankets she could use for the floor. I grabbed a couple blankets and pillows and made a sort of bed for her on the floor. She thanked me and then laid down on her side facing away from me. I guessed she was ready to go to sleep. I turned off the TV and closed my eyes. We didn't say a single word to each other, and I have to admit it was very awkward. I fell asleep probably half an hour after shutting the TV, but I awoke randomly in the middle of the night. I sat up and looked down at the floor and was able to see that Kylie didn't appear to be laying on the floor anymore. I flipped on the lamp and looked around the room. She wasn't anywhere actually, but just then I heard a voice downstairs. It sounded like it could be Kylie. All the walls in my apartment are paper thin, so noise travels quite easily throughout it. I quietly left my room and stood at the foot of the top of the stairs, listening for what Kylie could be saying. All the lights upstairs were off, but she was talking in a low voice. I just couldn't tell for sure what exactly she was saying. I figured she was on the phone with someone, but still, I went downstairs to check. I stepped into the dark kitchen, and there she was. But she wasn't on the phone. She was just creepily sitting in one of the chairs facing the wall. She seemed to still be muttering to herself. I was frozen. All I could say was, "Kylie?" She turned her head to me slowly, looked at me for a few seconds, then turned back to face the wall. I went upstairs quickly to my room and crawled into my bed to call my dad. I had to call at least 3 times before he finally picked up, obviously sounding concerned. I told him in a quiet panic that some random girl from online was staying the night, and now she was sitting in my kitchen muttering to herself like a crazy person. He sounded confused as hell, but told me to call 911 if she seemed like she was having some kind of episode to safely get her out of there. Then I looked up and noticed a figure standing by my bedroom door in the dark. It was Kylie. All I saw was the outline of her skinny body. She stood there for maybe 10 seconds. All I heard was my dad on the other end of the phone saying hello over and over. The next thing I saw was the silhouette of Kylie at my door suddenly charge at me in my bed as she began to scream. She lunged at me and put her hands around my throat, trying to choke me. However, I was able to quickly overpower her and hold her down against the bed. I screamed at my dad to call the cops. I was able to drag the insane girl downstairs by the time the cops came. The cops took her away to fill out a few documents. I think it's safe to say that you should always meet people from websites and apps in a safe, public place first. I've been single most of my life. However, I've used apps like Tinder or Badoo just for fun for a long time. Have I met some weird people? Yes. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened in February of 2014. Dead of winter, the time of year that these apps are perhaps most useful if you're just looking for casual fun when you can't have fun outside. I was using the app Badoo, and at any given moment I would be messaging at least 5 different girls, only because I'd know 9 out of 10 conversations would end up dying. One conversation kept going strong, however. The girl's name was Maria. Every time I'd hear that triple note ding, a notification from Badu saying, "Maria sent you a new message," I'd actually get a little excited. I asked if she was down to hang out tonight. She wrote back yeah, and asked for my address. I gave it to her without hesitation. She said she'd be right back. I said, "Wait, give me your number so we could text." But she didn't respond. After a few minutes, it said she was offline. The app did that when someone wasn't active for a few minutes. So I figured it'd be back soon, and I patiently waited while going back to watching TV. I kept routinely checking the app to see if she came back online, but she stayed offline. An hour passed, and now it was getting a bit late for her to even come over. Plus, I was getting kind of tired, so the idea was kind of shot. I went to bed. The next morning, I woke up early. It was raining outside, and it was still a little dark. I checked the clock, and it was 6:30 in the morning. I was grateful it wasn't like 11 and I could get back to sleep. I did, however, pick up my phone to check for any new text and junk. I saw a few notifications from Badu, actually. Maria had messaged me a few times. I opened the app as I rubbed my eyes. She said, "Hey, I'm coming now," at like 3 a.m. Then, at like 3:20 a.m., it said, "I'm here." At 4 a.m., it said, "I'm watching you." I noticed it said she was online too, and then the triple tone sound beeped, meaning I got a new message from her. It said, "How did you sleep?" My heart started to race, and I felt a feeling of unease in my chest and in my head. I right away looked out the window to see if anyone was hiding in the bushes outside. Then I shut the blind. I typed back, "Who the hell is this?" 10 seconds later, I got the disturbing message, "Check your closet and find out." I looked across my room, to the closet door that I know was closed last night. The closet door that was now cracked open. I was so shook I almost couldn't breathe. Then, the door pushed open ever so slowly, revealing the dark inside of the closet. I started screaming for my dad. I had to run past the closet to leave my room, but as I got to my dad's room to find the bed empty, I had completely forgotten he wasn't home for the weekend. My older brother was home though, and he came rushing to see what the commotion was, to which I told him to check the closet with me. When we checked the closet, there wasn't a single trace of anyone having been in there. Then a cold breeze hit me, and I realized my stupid self didn't lock my window the night before. Things made a little more sense now. I went to the police station to show the messages on the app in hopes they could track the person, but apparently it wasn't that easy. I would need court orders and such in order for Badu to be required to release the information of the user. I refrained from doing anything. However, luckily after a long week of sleeping in fear, nothing happened, and I was able to move on with my life.
This is something you guys have been requesting the hell out of for a long time. It took a lot of time, but I finally found 3 stories that take place during school lockdowns. It was a typical boring day in calculus, only it was Friday, 7th period, meaning the week was almost over and spring break would finally be upon us, so everybody was getting antsy in their seats, I could tell. We didn't have a test that day like a lot of my friends did with their other teachers, so our teacher in the middle of class just decided to start playing games with us on Sporkle.com. He was a very laid-back teacher like that. As we were doing some brand logo quiz on Sporkle, I remember the exact moment it happened. Right after my friend answered a question, I remember the exact answer too, Adidas. The dean's voice came through the loudspeaker. He sounded panicked and frantic as he told all the teachers this was not a drill and to go into lockdown. I actually got the chills and I got goosebumps on my arms as our usually laid-back teacher too seemed panicked as he ran to turn off the lights and ushered us to the back corner of the room. We all sat in silence for about 2 minutes, and then the usual buzzing that came from a panel in the back of the room ceased, indicating that the school must have cut all the power. We all looked at each other, realizing this must be serious. A few more minutes of waiting later, we heard a man screaming at the top of his lungs coming down the hallway. 2 girls in the class actually started crying, which made all of us even more scared. As the screaming got closer to the classroom, the lunatic-sounding man started banging on the lockers while screaming, "I'll kill all of you." It was at that moment that I started to fear for my life. My teacher shushed us as we all looked at each other to see our peers' reactions. The banging then moved from the lockers to our classroom door. And that's when one of the crying girls screamed no. The banging on the door only grew worse as the man started screaming, "Open up." 2 of the girls in the class were crying out loud now. It felt like an eternity that man was pounding at the door, but eventually he finally continued down the hallway, screaming like a mentally insane person until we could not hear him anymore. I'd say 10 minutes later, though it felt like half an hour given the situation, the dean came back on the loudspeaker explaining the situation, which was surprising for him to do. He explained that some apparently mentally unstable person entered the building and assaulted the woman sitting at the front desk, causing her to flee the building screaming, and staff wasn't sure if the man was armed or not. Now, this was before the school had cameras or could afford proper security, so the school was wide open to something like this happening. The staff had done a sweep of all the hallways and classrooms and couldn't find him, so the dean instructed the teachers to resume teaching but to keep all the doors locked and to not let any students leave for any reasons. The most disturbing part, however, is that one of the janitors working the night shift found the man sleeping in one of the storage closets near the back end of the school, and according to rumors that were spread by my peers, sticking out of his pocket was a .44 Magnum. The janitor must have done something stupid to wake him up, for example, leaving the closet door open, because by the time a police officer could arrive on the scene, the man was gone. My entire class, as far as I know, to this day, has no idea if this man was ever found, but I like to think that right now, he's being given the proper help that he needs. My school has 2 lunch periods. First lunch period is for all 6th graders and some 7th graders. The second lunch period is for the other half of the 7th graders and all 8th graders. The lockdown happened in the beginning of October. The day the lockdown occurred, it was overcast and rainy. During the first lunch period, I heard 4 loud booms. I personally thought it was thunder, but the entire lunch crowd started screaming. I was thinking those kids were just serious pussies, but the campus security came in and started yelling at people to go into the multi-purpose room, and the kids who were in line buying lunch had to throw out their lunch and come inside. Me and some friends went inside the room along with a huge group of other kids. Everyone was curious as to what was happening. Our multi-purpose room is huge, and the back wall of the room is made of see-through glass. When me and my friends were rushed inside the campus, security was covering the glass with the curtains, and there were adults at every exit. My friend Eric was curious, as well as the rest of us, so he asked one of the adults what was going on. When he came back, he said, "You know how right in front of TMS there's those houses?" I replied, "Yeah." "There's this mentally disabled, crazy man that barricaded himself in front of his house, and he's threatening to commit suicide and kill the cops if he's evicted. He was walking around outside of school watching kids in a weird way," Eric told us. It turned out the man was also a registered sex offender, making matters worse. We were stuck in the multi-purpose room for a whole hour, taking up 2 periods. After the whole thing was settled, we were escorted to our classrooms one by one. I later found out that the man lives next to my friend Brandy, who told me about the previous Halloween when she saw the same man at his window cutting his arm and writing in his own blood, "Don't come here or I'll kill you," on his window. Of course, being Halloween, people, including Brandy, assumed it was just for the holiday. But after this horrific incident, we knew this man was mental, and we're glad he never got near us. I'm 22 years old, fresh out of college, and I recently got a job at my old high school as a sort of computer intern in the school basement. The basement of the school is very messy and disorganized, but there is a small 3-person office that's actually very nice down there. It has 3 nice big desks, 2 mini fridges, a flat screen TV mounted on the wall, and oh so satisfying air conditioning, a luxury the students and teachers cannot enjoy in the school. And of course all the school servers and other computery stuff. I got the job because 3 of my old computer teachers flat out adored me. I could actually consider them as real friends, not just teacher figures, so they all helped tremendously in landing me this job. It's been great, until something that happened a few weeks ago. My 2 co-workers that shared the office with me, Dave and Gary, weren't in the office at the time. They were upstairs working on papers or whatever. I was eating my sandwich during my lunch break when I got a phone call from one of the women in the front office telling me the school was on lockdown and that somebody, possibly armed, had entered the school. There wasn't much that I could do other than turn off the lights because, surprisingly, as nice as this little office was, it didn't have an actual door to it, just a big opening, and the door to the whole basement didn't even have a working lock. For my own safety, I did turn off all the lights in the office and my computer screen. I kept my phone on the desk, texting both Gary and Dave, but they wouldn't respond. I sat down there in the dark playing games on my phone for like 20 minutes, waiting for the call from up front to tell me to resume working. I had no idea what was happening. I couldn't hear what was going on upstairs from down here. But I was not allowed to make any calls until I was informed that the lockdown was over. Then the noisy basement door opened. As the creaking echoed across the basement and into my office, I sat up from my seat, wondering if I should call out Gary or Dave. I was eager to get some info from them. Someone then came running down the stairs and their footsteps were approaching my office. I pushed away my chair and crawled under my desk. Somebody entered the office but did not turn on the lights. There was just silence. I can't even describe the fear I was experiencing. I felt like if I made one sudden noise, I'd be a dead man. Suddenly, my phone dinged as I got a text message. I felt my entire world shrivel up and die at that one moment as I clenched my teeth in fear. Footsteps suddenly moved closer to me until I finally dove out from under the desk in capitulation, begging whoever it was not to kill me. And just then, someone grabbed my arm and pulled me up. It was some guy in a red plaid button-up, jeans, and a reddish-black cap. He told me, "It's okay, I'm just down here hiding with you." "What's going on up there?" I whispered to him. He kind of ignored my question and asked me if there's an exit down here. I told him, "Yeah, around that way." Before he could do anything else, I asked him, "Who are you?" There was a brief moment of silence. Before he started explaining he was coming in to pick up his son, when a teacher told him to hide. After his explanation, I checked my phone and saw the text I received was from Dave. It said, "Dude, this is fucking crazy. Some guy with a gun shot Mr. Buckley. He's wearing a red shirt and a hat. Whatever you do, don't come upstairs." I was about to reread that text out loud to the man, until I realized. I looked up and felt my stomach sink. The man seemed to catch on to my suspicious stare. Panicking, all I could think to do was to run for the upstairs. A gunshot echoed through the basement and I could hear the bullet ricochet off something metal in the darkness. But thank God the bullet missed me and I made it upstairs. Fortunately, police were waiting at all exits, including the basement exit, and caught the man the second he opened the door. More good news, our teacher Mr. Buckley survived the gunshot. It was later determined that the man and Mr. Buckley had some beef for whatever reason, but that was never revealed. All we know is that Mr. Buckley couldn't have done anything that would have warranted this kind of reaction. And I know that the sound of that gunshot will forever echo in my mind.
my early days after graduating college, I didn't have a lot of money, so I had to rent an apartment with someone else who I'd never met before. He'd become my roommate, and his name was Randall. At first, he seemed easy enough to get along with. He didn't talk too much, but he had a heavy Spanish accent. The room I'd be getting was already furnished, and that was one of the appealing factors to this apartment. It had a twin-sized bed tucked in the corner, a nice-sized dresser, a closet, and a TV stand in another corner of the room. There were a bunch of stuffed animals sitting on the dresser though, which I found a bit odd. Most notably, a big teddy bear facing the bed. When I asked Randall about the stuffed animals, he gave a really loud laugh and said his room had the same thing. He recommended I leave them be as to show respect to the landlord. I didn't really talk to Randall much that first day other than that. I spent most of my time unpacking my clothes and supplies and setting up my TV. When I was laying in the bed watching TV that night, I thought I heard something. It was a very brief noise, but it was definitely audible, and it sounded like some kind of small electronic component. I chalked it up to being a house noise and continued my show. The next day, Randall wasn't home all day. I didn't know if or where he worked, but I just assumed he was at work. That night, when I was in my room watching TV, I heard the front door open, and Randall walked through the hall to his room before shutting the door. A little later, I was getting changed into my pajamas when I heard the same sound from the night before. This time without the TV noise in the background, so I heard it much clearer. It was definitely some kind of electronic device, but I didn't know what or where. It still didn't seem like a big deal, so I got into my bed and started reading my current book at the time, then went to sleep. The next day, I saw Randall when I came home after work, and he asked me what book I was reading. At first I didn't get the question, but then he said he was talking about the book that I was reading in my room. I looked at him in silence and confusion. I asked him how he knew I was reading a book, and he said in his heavy Spanish accent that he had to go into my room just to take something out that he left in there, and that's when he noticed the book. I asked him nicely not to go into my room anymore. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lock on the door, so I couldn't stop him when I wasn't home. That night, when I grabbed my book from under my bed, I stopped and wondered, how would he see my book if I had it under my bed? Thinking about this now creeped me out, and I was in no mood to read anymore. I looked around the room as I thought to myself, then I noticed that big teddy bear on the dresser again. How it was angled so perfectly to face me in the bed. Then I had a thought, a scary thought. I stood up and walked over to the bear, grabbed it, and looked closely into its eyes. I felt my heart skip a beat when I realized there was a camera in one of the eye holes. I threw the thing into the corner of the room and went to Randall's door and tried opening it. His door apparently had a lock because it wouldn't open, but I knew he was in there. I pounded on the door screaming his name, but he wouldn't answer. I saw the light sneaking in through the bottom of the door go dark, as I assumed he turned off the light. I went back to my room and called the landlord. I explained everything and told him I'm leaving right now, and I had a valid reason to void the contract. I packed the little amount of things I brought into my car and left that same night, never looking back. The landlord surprisingly never even came to me to collect the money for those few days I was there. Ever since that night, I have a phobia of stuffed bears. Like, I always have to turn them away so that they're not facing me. It's 2016. Our new neighbors invite our family over for a nighttime barbecue. My mom and my dad and my sister and I meet in their backyard at like 8 o'clock. This is the first time that I personally meet them. It's just a husband and wife and a teenage boy. I quickly learn the boy's name is Jeremy. The husband seems to be the nicest of them all. There's something cold about the wife, and the son Jeremy seems to have some kind of mental or social issues because he won't talk at all. He constantly looks all over the place, and he seems to be really sad or gloomy. I also catch him staring at me a few times. Each time I grow increasingly uncomfortable around him and try even harder not to look at him anymore. After eating a burger and hot dog each, our parents pretty much talk to his parents. I wait a little bit before sneaking back to our house because I was bored and uncomfortable. The next day on my walk to school, since I live 2 blocks away from the high school, I turned my head around a few houses after passing our neighbor's house, and see someone jump behind a tree as if to be hiding. I turn back in front of me and start to walk faster. I get to the last block before the school and turn around again. This time I see the same person hiding in a bush in front of someone's house. It's Jeremy. I can tell by his long hair, and he's looking right at me. I walk as fast as I can without running, and make it to the school safely a minute later. When I get home that day, I tell my parents, and they go over and talk to the neighbors. When my parents come back to talk to me, I learn from them that Jeremy is apparently not like the other kids, according to his parents word for word. That also seemed to be enough explanation for my parents to tell me to just ignore him, as if him following me to school wasn't an insanely creepy thing to do. Later on, I go outside to sit on the patio and do my homework, and just as Jeremy and his creepiness come to mind, I turn to look at the neighboring house, up at the only window that overlooks our backyard. And there he is. Jeremy is sitting at that window looking at me. But as he notices me, he quickly hides. I run inside and tell my parents, and they once again quote what his parents said and tell me not to worry about him. Later that night, after texting friends and whatnot in bed, I finally put my phone down on the desk and roll on my side to go to sleep. A certain amount of time that I can't remember passes before I hear a click at my window, and then suddenly my window slides open. Without even knowing who's there, I scream at the top of my lungs, and soon my parents come rushing inside, all while I'm pressing up against the wall in shock as someone climbs through my window into my room. My parents turn on the lights, revealing Jeremy holding a large kitchen knife. Everyone screams, including my father, as he comes and grabs me to pull me out of the room. The four of us all rush to the neighbor's house to tell them. The man next door leads us into our own house and grabs his son when he finds him in the living room. He snatches the knife from his hands and tugs him out of the house. My dad sends all of us inside as he stays outside screaming at the man next door. Moments later, he comes back inside and calls the police to get a restraining order. My dad promised those neighbors a living hell if they were not moved out by the next week. The police come and take Jeremy away, probably to some kind of place for people with mental disabilities, not a regular jail. Moving along to a week later, Jeremy didn't stay in that house anymore. We don't know where he stays now, but we've never seen him since. This story was by far the scariest thing to ever happen in my life. I went to a bar with my friends on a Saturday night, and as we usually did, we all got decently intoxicated. The night became a complete blur about an hour after showing up to the bar. I vaguely remember talking to a few guys that came up to me. Didn't remember anything out of the ordinary, though. I live walking distance to the bar we were at that night, so I guess when I got tired or bored, I left. And I do remember walking to my house that night. I think it was when I was starting to sober up a little bit. We always used to leave a key under a flower pot in our stoop, and I always used that key on nights like this so that I wouldn't have to walk around with my keys on me while I'm drunk. I got home, locked the door behind me, and went straight to my room to fall into my bed. I skipped the changing into pajamas and brushing my teeth and whatnot. I did lay there awake with my phone in my hands, texting my friends, seeing if they were still there and making sure they got home okay though. Suddenly, I heard the front door open downstairs. The only thing I was thinking was that it could be my little brother getting home, since he usually got home really late. My best friend texted back asking how I got away from the guy. I replied back, "What guy?" She said the creep that wouldn't stop talking to me at the bar. The bar was such a blur that I didn't remember which specific guy she could be talking about. I heard some noises downstairs. I assumed my brother was making a late-night snack in the kitchen. Then I heard walking up the stairs. My best friend texted me again saying she saw him leave the bar right after me. Now I was still decently drunk, but still, I was starting to become suspicious. Steps came up the stairs outside, then stopped outside my door. Then the door quietly opened. It was dark outside of the room too, so I couldn't see who was standing at my door. I said my brother's name, and then the door shut. But I didn't hear whoever it was walk away, so I was led to believe they were standing outside my door. I immediately texted my brother asking if it was him. Surprisingly, he texted back right away saying, "Was what me? And why do you keep opening the front door?" We live with our mom. She's the only other person in the house, but she was away for the week, so I didn't know what to think, other than it was an intruder. I called the cops without telling my brother, and hearing 911 "what is your emergency" for the first time in my life really made the situation seem that much more severe. I described what I believed to be a break-in, and as I was on the phone, I leaned over and turned on my bedroom lamp. As the room went from dark to bright, I saw a man standing in the corner of the room by the door. I screamed and shrieked while still on the line with a 911 operator, who kept asking what's wrong. The man in the corner opened the door and fled the scene. I heard him run out the front door. I stayed on the line with the operator, who advised me every move I should make until a cop car actually showed up. I was still intoxicated, so the info I gave on the police report was probably not the most accurate, but I described the man to be mid-20s looking, stocky, full beard, and a short haircut. One of the two officers then lifted his hand, revealing a key he was holding, and said he found that in the front door lock. It was the spare key that we keep under the flower pot. The intruder used it to get in, meaning he followed me home and watched me take the key from under the pot. The officer told me to rest assured he'd be patrolling close around the area all night, and advised my brother and I to keep our doors locked and find a new hiding spot for the key. The next day, besides my hangover, I felt relieved. I told my friends about what happens, and they described everything in detail. That some creepy-looking guy in the bar had been following me all night trying to talk to me every chance he got, and somehow I was oblivious to it. I took a long break from going to bars, and we don't hide a key outside anymore.
Before getting into today's stories, I'd like to talk about today's sponsor, Fume. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device. Flavored air is quickly becoming the leading alternative to vaping and smoking. Fume will become a habit you're free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habit easy. It fills the void in a natural, guilt-free way, and you won't feel left out as your friends are reaching for their bad habits. Fume isn't like vaping. It draws flavor to your mouth without the vapor, and contains no nicotine, so it's not addictive. All flavors are non-toxic. My favorite part is it requires no batteries, so you never need to charge it. Plus, the piece looks really cool and is fun to hold and fidget with, which in of itself can help calm anxiety. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you could be the next success story. For a limited time, use my code NIGHTMARE to get your free topper. It's the perfect accessory to your Fume device. Slip it onto the mouthpiece for a softer, warmer feel. It's chewable for those who love to fidget, and it's reusable. Head to tryfume.com, that's tryfum.com, and use code NIGHTMARE or scan the QR code on screen to get your free Fume topper when you order your journey pack today. I wasn't very social in college. I didn't get good grades, I wasn't in a frat, I didn't have a girlfriend, and I wasn't very involved in anything. I wasn't a very happy kid. I'm not complaining though. I found a loyal girl who would never stop fighting for me in my late 30s. My life is good now. We live together with 2 cats named Blue and Raz, and I'm planning on proposing soon. Like I was saying though, I wasn't in a frat, so generic frat parties were kind of off the table for me. I still wanted to have fun though. I mean, who wouldn't? My friends Bryson and Ian were in the same boat. We spent most weekends killing time in Bryson's dorm. That being said, we took every chance we got when it came to parties. Most of the parties we were lucky enough to go to were off campus, meaning they weren't associated with any of the frats or the school itself. One time we actually drove over an hour just to go to a party. It's safe to say we were pretty desperate. One Friday afternoon, Ian texted the group chat saying the girl he was talking to knew of a party not that far away. Ian tended to attract the strangest girls. I'm sure you know the ones I'm talking about. Bryson joked that he didn't want to go to some death metal, emo anime party, which I kind of agreed with. Ian was pretty adamant though, and convinced us that this would be a normal party. It's not like we had anything better going on. Bryson convinced his brother Chris to be our designated driver. Chris didn't drink anyway, and said he'd be down for a party, so everything was looking good. As we were driving to the party, Ian started complaining about the girl he was talking to. He said she hadn't answered him in hours, which honestly wasn't too surprising considering the kind of guy Ian was. He was actually pretty torn, and said he was having second thoughts about even going, which seemed like an overreaction. We were already 30 minutes deep, so we weren't just gonna go turn around and go home. We told him to suck it up and not let it ruin the night. After a few more minutes, Ian said Callista's profile disappeared from his phone altogether. We broke it to him that he had been blocked and she probably decided to go to the party with someone else. He pouted for the rest of the drive. When we reached the party, we instantly knew we'd made the right choice. The house was massive, especially compared to the rest of the houses on the block. Ian didn't want to go in just yet, saying he needed a buzz to take his mind off the situation. Bryson and I didn't object to drinking, so we told Chris to park a little further down the street so we could pregame outside the car. We killed a few of the beers we had brought with us and watched as people entered the house in droves. It honestly looked like a pretty lit party. Once Ian was satisfied with his buzz, the four of us started making our way over to the house. As soon as we stepped inside, I could tell something was off. For starters, all the lights were on, like there was no ambient lighting throughout the entire house, just the bright overhead lights that you'd expect to be off at a college party. Most of the people there were very nicely dressed, not what you'd expect people to wear at a rowdy party. The scene looked more like a fancy dinner party than anything else, but maybe that's what it was. After all, we didn't really have any details about what we were walking into. We didn't look too out of place, but the clothing differences were definitely noticeable. The music was also bizarre. They weren't playing trap or hip-hop or any of the usual party music. Instead, they were playing some kind of ethereal, almost druggy music. I'm not really sure what genre it was or how to describe it, but none of the songs had any words, just instruments. I guess it wasn't bad per se, but it was odd. My friends and I looked at each other, trying to make sense of what was going on. We drilled Ian for details, but he said he was just as clueless as we were. The four of us walked around a little, exploring the house. There was alcohol everywhere, so we helped ourselves. A few minutes in, I started noticing people catching my eye and then immediately looking away. It was actually so apparent that I started wondering if there was something in my teeth. I figured I was just getting looks because of what I was wearing, which did make sense to me at the time. The four of us were honestly having a good time, despite the weird atmosphere. Actually, I take that back. Chris was pretty bored and said he was going to go smoke in his car. We figured it was because he didn't have a drop of alcohol in him. A few minutes after he left, a group of girls approached us. We definitely weren't super confident, so getting approached was a new thing. The three of them started flirting with us almost immediately, like it wasn't even subtle. They joked about an entrance fee, which I thought was funny until I saw that they were being serious. They were holding a bottle of tequila, which we definitely weren't going to turn down. Without much thought, and not wanting to appear uncool, we swigged the bottle. After that point, the six of us stuck together, drinking, talking, and occasionally dancing. It was going really well. At one point, I noticed a weird mark on Tina's neck. It was a short but solid green line that looked like it had been drawn on in Sharpie. The line was pretty thin, and I probably wouldn't have noticed it had I not been standing so close to her. I debated asking her about it, but decided against it to avoid potentially offending her. It might have been a birthmark or something like that. Once I had seen it though, I couldn't unsee it. It just looked so unnatural, and green of all colors. Who wears green makeup? It couldn't have been a makeup smear. I decided to let it go and continued flirting with her, wondering where things would end up. Eventually, I saw Bryson and the girl he was with begin to wander off upstairs, which I was happy about. Pretty soon afterwards, I noticed Ian and his girl also walking towards the stairs. I was nervous to ask Tina anything suggestive because I didn't want to mess anything up. Despite the alcohol, I could feel myself getting really anxious and sweaty, so I told Tina I was going to the bathroom and that I'd be right back. The only bathroom I could find was occupied, so I stood outside the door and waited. Eventually, the door opened and a really tall, older-looking guy wearing a white button-down and linen pants stepped out. I rushed into the bathroom and he bumped into me. I turned around and kind of expected him to apologize, but he just stood there, staring at me. It was the strangest thing. He just stood there with this blank look, sizing me up. I was about to say something when I noticed what was on his neck. The same green line I had seen on Tina. It was literally identical. Against my better judgment, I asked him what his problem was. He smirked and shook his head before saying, Who invited you? Not knowing how to answer that, I blurted out Callista, the girl that had stood up Ian. He chuckled and looked up, like he knew who I was talking about. He looked back at me, his smile completely gone now. In a low voice, he repeated her name before gesturing around the party. Do you see Callista here? I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just slammed the door in his face, wondering what the hell had just happened. I couldn't get over what he said or that green mark on his neck. Part of me regretted not asking him more questions about what the hell was going on. I left the bathroom, looking for him. I walked past more people that eyed me up like I didn't belong. I didn't care though. I was gonna find my friends and drag them out of here. While wandering around the party, I couldn't stop thinking about that green mark. I started looking closely at people's necks, trying to see if anyone else had a mark on their neck. And to my horror, I actually saw 2 more people with the green lines on their necks. They were all the same color, same length, same thickness, same everything. It was freaky. I kept looking for that guy, all the while analyzing people's necks. Most people weren't marked up, but I kept catching glimpses of green lines on various people's necks. I was starting to freak out, so I made my way to the stairs, looking for my friends. Thankfully, as I was walking up the stairs, Bryson and Ian were walking down. I urged the 2 of them to follow me, and I brought them to an empty hallway so we could talk. I briefly told them about my theory and said we had to leave immediately. They burst out laughing and told me I was just drunk. Bryson told me I was just jealous because they had hooked up and I didn't. I asked him where his girl had gone, and he told me she had instructed him to meet back upstairs in 20 minutes. Ian said his girl told him the same thing. There was no reasoning with these 2. They were riding the high of a hookup. I told them to follow me and that I'd prove that people had strange marks on their necks, but they weren't budging. Just when I was about to give up, Ian turned to the side, and what I saw was actually horrifying. There was a thin line on his neck, only this one was red, not green. I practically screamed at him, which actually got them to listen to me. I then inspected Bryson's neck, and there was a red mark on his too. Ian told me to relax and that it was probably just a makeup stain, but Bryson started to believe me. I told them we were leaving, and Bryson and I turned to find the door. Ian still wouldn't leave, saying he wanted to meet back up with the girl. Just then, a random guy walked past us, eyeing each of us up separately. He didn't say anything, but paused long enough for us to notice the green line on his neck. That was it. Bryson and I rushed for the door with Ian close behind. It felt like everyone there was staring at us as we left, but no one moved to stop us. We ran to Chris's car and told him to drive. As we were leaving, both Ian and Bryson's phones started blowing up. Those girls were asking why we had left. How could they have even known that? They weren't even around to see us leave. My friends blocked the girls. Everyone I tell this story to has their own crazy theory about what happened that night. I really don't know what to think about it, but I don't think I want to know what might have happened had that guy not tipped me off. I'm a graduate student studying civil engineering at Purdue University. I actually started a few months ago. I was in a good place, all things considered. Classes were going well, I made a couple friends, and the apartment I found was decently priced. The landlord was pretty sketchy, though. I had a car and lived pretty far away from campus, but I liked driving. The only downside, it was a sketchy part of town, but I didn't care much about that. I'm a guy in my mid-20s, so I figured I could handle myself. Yeah, things were a little boring, but I was there for a degree and not a party. Everything was pretty normal, until the day my backpack got stolen. I had left it on a table in a random hall to go to the bathroom like an idiot. By the time I got back, it was gone. Of course, that specific lecture hall didn't have cameras, so there was literally nothing I could do. I was more annoyed than anything. My wallet, keys, and laptop were in there. I had to cancel my cards and get new ones, report my keys missing to the landlord, and start looking for a replacement laptop. It was a whole thing. It sucked, but things happen. It wasn't until a few days later that I realized the situation was 1,000 times worse than I had anticipated. I drove home from campus one evening to find a handwritten note slipped under my door. I figured it was just a reminder from my landlord about something, but I was dead wrong. When I opened it up, it just said, "I see you." No name, no signature, just those 3 words. I instantly put 2 and 2 together. Whoever had stolen my backpack had gone through my laptop somehow and figured out where I lived. That was terrifying enough, but just then I had a thought that was so much worse. Whoever had stolen my backpack had my apartment keys. I felt my skin starting to itch, and I looked over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone there. I ran into my apartment and slammed the door shut. I had a deadlock, so even if someone did try to break in, they wouldn't be able to get past that. Over the next week, I got more notes, all handwritten. They weren't long, just weird phrases like, "I know what you did," or "watch yourself." At that point, it was really starting to freak me out. I had never done anything wrong really, but if someone had gone through my laptop, who knows what they could have found? I really didn't know what to do. Would going to the police even help? I figured I'd wait it out a little longer, hoping whoever was messing with me would get bored. One night, I was getting ready for bed when I noticed something. It was dark outside and my blinds were half closed, but I could have sworn I saw a flash, like someone took a picture of me. I quickly pulled the blinds down, but my heart was racing. There was no one there. Things didn't stop there. I started noticing small things around my apartment, things being moved. At first, I thought I was just being careless. My shoes would be in a different spot, or my coat would be draped over the chair instead of hung up. It was little things that I could explain away if I really tried. But then, one day, I came home to find my bedsheets stripped off and my room completely turned upside down. My dresser drawers were pulled out, my books scattered across the floor. It looked like someone had torn through the place. I called the cops, of course, but they didn't do much. No forced entry, nothing stolen, so there was not much they could do apparently. I asked my landlord to change the locks, but he said it would take at least 2 days to get someone out. I begged him to make it happen sooner, but he shrugged it off, saying it wasn't an emergency. I felt betrayed. How in the world could this guy not think that this was an emergency? I kept pressuring him to do something, but he eventually stopped answering, no matter what I said. That was literally yesterday as I'm writing this. I barely slept at all last night, even though I was safe with the deadlock in place. I'm thinking of changing the locks myself, but I'm not sure how I could even do that without causing expensive damage. I called out of all my classes this morning because I'm afraid to leave my room. I'm still here, writing all this down. I'm prepared to confront whoever it is if they come back. I'm sure if they went through my laptop, they would know my class schedule. Maybe I'll hide somewhere and get the jump on them if they try to enter while I'm supposed to be at class. I think that's what I'm gonna do. I'll give an update when I can. I've been having an ongoing issue that I can't keep to myself anymore. I had just broken up with my boyfriend of 2 years, Ben. It wasn't a bad breakup, but it wasn't great either. We'd been arguing for months, and it was obvious things weren't going to work out. So, when we finally ended things, I thought it was for the best. I blocked him on everything, and that was that. I go to Temple University, and I live in this small apartment near campus. It's on the second floor of an older building, which means I can hear pretty much everything going on outside. A few days after the breakup, I started hearing strange noises at night. Not like regular city sounds, these were different. Footsteps, quiet shuffling, like someone was just outside my window. At first, I figured it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Eventually, though, I came to terms that it was probably my ex. The reason I wasn't really freaking out was because Ben was one of the sweetest and most harmless guys there was. I mean that in a nice way, like he'd never do anything drastic or anything to hurt me. I figured he just missed me, so I decided to let it go. Eventually, he'd get bored. Plus, I was already stressed from the breakup, and I had this huge group project due. That project is actually a huge component to this story. I was the one responsible for editing the project and sending it to our professor. I worked on it all night, making sure everything was perfect, and I emailed it just before midnight. Relieved to have it done, I went to bed, trying not to think about all the other things going wrong in my life. The next day in class, we were supposed to present the video. My professor plugged in his laptop and pulled up the file I'd sent. I was nervous, but I was also kind of proud of what we'd done. I had a lot of experience with Adobe products, and I knew our video was probably a cut above all the other groups. And then the video started playing, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't our project. Instead, there was this grainy video of someone wearing a scream mask. The person wasn't just sitting there, they were talking. They were saying horrible things about me, my professor, the government. It was disgusting. I don't even want to repeat what was said. That's how sick it was. My professor let the video play out a little longer than he should have, probably because he was also in shock. When he did pause it though, his face was pale. I was frozen in place. I have never been so mortified in my life. I was literally frozen. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. I could barely breathe. I felt hundreds of eyes on me. The rest of the class was staring at me. I knew what they were thinking. After the most painful seconds of my life, I snapped out of my humiliation and burst out into tears before running out of the lecture hall. I felt a panic attack coming on. I debated going home, but I knew I'd definitely get expelled if I just left. Reluctantly, I waited outside the building for the class to end before approaching my professor. I basically pleaded with him that I had no idea what happened, that I was positive I had sent the right video. He decided to hear me out and confirmed that 2 videos had been sent. The first one was my project, and the more recent one was the one he played in class. Clearing things up with the university took a lot of time and hassle, but I was eventually able to do it. I won't bore you with the details. Nothing was going to erase the humiliation, though. It was also clear that my email had been hacked, which was a much bigger problem. I changed my password and thought I had just gotten super unlucky. That's when things got worse. Not 1 week later, I woke up to being logged out of Snapchat. That only happens when someone else logs in, which meant I had gotten hacked there too. I don't even want to think about what they found. There was a lot of stuff on my Snapchat I don't feel comfortable talking about. I called the police, told them everything, and to my surprise, Ben agreed to let them question him. The police were able to confirm that Ben wasn't behind any of it. He did, however, admit that he posted my private information on some online forum right after we broke up. He swore he never posted any of my passwords, but my passwords were easy to guess, and like an idiot, I used the same password for everything. The police told me that there wasn't much they could do. Ben wasn't responsible for the hacking. That's when the full gravity of the situation hit me. Someone else had basically all of my private information. They could probably blackmail me. I changed my passwords immediately, but it might have been too late by then. A few weeks went by and nothing happened. My best guess is that whoever was tormenting me realized I had gotten the police involved and didn't want to risk being caught. I thought that was the end of it. Of course, it wasn't. One day, some random person added me on Snapchat, which wasn't too unusual. When I added them back, though, they started sending me pictures of me. I'm sure you can guess the types of things they were sending. I blocked them before they could threaten me, which I'm sure they were about to do. I burst into tears. I've never felt more helpless in my life. For about a week, random profiles would add me on Snapchat. I knew it was the same person, and I never accepted their ads out of fear that they would blackmail me or ask for money. This has been ongoing for about a week now, and I don't know what to do. There's literally no evidence or any way I can track this person. The police don't have enough information to get involved, and it's not like they could do anything anyway. The worst part is they literally know my address and whatever else about my personal life. If I keep ignoring their Snapchat ads, they might do something drastic. They've already lurked outside my apartment. I wouldn't put it past them to go further. I'm praying that they get bored and just quit. For any young ladies listening, be careful about what kind of pictures are on your phone. I don't know if this will ever end. I'm a mother of 3, and so our grocery bills are quite high. My husband works at a tech company, and I currently stay at home raising the kids, who are 10, 7, and 3. I go food shopping at least twice a week, and I usually go to the King Cullen near our house, though I sometimes go to the nearby Target as well. Those are 2 of a very small list of grocery stores in our quiet town. To give as much context as possible, we're an Italian family and I'm currently 40 years old. This happened not even a year ago when I was 39. I was running behind on shopping one day, so I went much later than usual. The King Cullen by us closes at 10, and it was definitely past 9 o'clock already, so I hurried over to the store with my flyers and coupons. The kids were complaining about a lack of food in the house, so I had to get a quick grocery run in. Most days I'd have to go shopping with my 3-year-old daughter Haley. Since it was late and my husband was home from work at this time, for once I was able to go shopping alone, which I consider a luxury. I got to the King Cullen, which was pretty void of people at this hour since it would soon be closing. I grabbed a cart and quickly started doing my laps down the aisles and grabbing whatever was on my list and whatever was on sale. I was in the cereal aisle when I got a tap on my shoulder, which startled me. I turned and saw a very tan man about my height with a baseball cap on, a black goatee, and a red zipper-up hoodie and jeans on. He laughed and apologized for startling me, and said that he'd been looking everywhere for a specific bag of chips that was in my cart, and he asked where I found them. I politely told him the aisle, and he said he checked but couldn't find it. So I actually led him exactly to where I found the chips. He thanked me with his awful breath, and I smiled and was about to walk back to my cart, but then he started making pointless conversation with me about why he liked those chips so much. Something silly like the ingredients or a lack of a specific ingredient. I kept trying to make it obvious that I was inching my way back to my cart. He wouldn't get the hint though. It was when he made a weird pause and then said, "Gosh, you're pretty," that I said thank you and that I had to get back to my shopping before they close. I went to my cart, but he followed me and kept talking to me. At this point, as politely as I could, I told him I really would just like to shop in peace. He finally seemed to get the hint and walked away, but for the rest of my time in the store that night, I kept seeing that man circling the aisles, and each time he walked past the aisle I was in, he'd slow down or even stop and just look down at me. I was getting increasingly uncomfortable and hurried up my shopping. When I was finally done, I went to the checkout, and as I emptied my cart, here comes red hoodie guy with a whole 2 or 3 items, and he waits on line right behind me. He doesn't say a word anymore, but I felt his gaze even through the back of my head. When I was done checking out, I pushed my cart away, and the man called out, "Have a good night, ma'am," and I ignored it. As I was unloading my car, I noticed the red hoodie guy in the parking lot looking at me as he walked to his car. He got into a junky-looking Honda that must have been like 30 years old. He didn't turn the car on though, he just sat in it. I finally finished loading my car, so I got inside, started it, and began driving out of the parking lot. I looked in my rearview mirror a few times, and I didn't see any headlights behind me, so I felt safe to drive home. It wasn't until I pulled into the driveway and looked to my left down the street that I realized there was a car with its headlights off driving slowly down the street approaching our house. It pulled to the curb a few houses down. It looked to be that Honda from the parking lot. I went inside the house and called my husband's name. He came downstairs looking concerned, and I told him I was followed home by a creep. He hurried outside to the stoop, but by this time, the car was already gone. The following weekend, late at night when we were all in bed, we heard some shuffling around outside in the side yard. I shook my husband to go check what it was, and he went to slide the window open. He saw someone right below the window trying to open the side gate to the backyard, but after hearing the window slide open, the man looked up and started to run. My husband grabbed the baseball bat from under the bed and ran outside, and when he came back a minute later, he said he saw the car speeding down the street and he tried to chase after it. He perfectly described the shitty Honda that the red hoodie guy was driving. It was undoubtedly him. We phoned the police, and given the late hour, a police officer arrived to our house in under 5 minutes. I described the man and his car the best I could, and that was that. He never returned to our house, not after seeing my angry husband chasing his car on foot with a bat. It still remains uncomfortable that a creep like that knows where I live, though. When I was in college, I worked at Walbaum's. The one I worked at was a 24-hour one, so a couple unfortunate people would always be stuck working that awful shift. I thought since I was 20 and in college that my boss would never put me on an overnight shift. But unfortunately, I guess when she asked my school schedule and I told her I was off Mondays and Wednesdays, she saw me as a perfect sucker to stick on the overnight shift occasionally moving forward. One day I saw that I was scheduled for a Tuesday night from 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. I had to triple check the schedule to make sure that that was right. I felt sick seeing that, and when I asked my supervisor why I was put on the overnight shift, he told me if I'm over 18, I don't really have a choice. I considered quitting, but I needed the job and money, so I just sucked it up and decided I'd do it this one time and then tell my boss I can't do it ever again because I have to study for school. So I arrived at the store at 12 o'clock and relieved my coworker Amanda. Half the lights in the store were out at this hour to save on electricity. There were a surprising amount of customers in the store when I got there. I guess more people than I expected would do quick midnight shopping runs. Past 1 a.m. though, the place was completely dead. Maybe 3 customers in the entire hour. As it got later in the night, there were less and less customers. It was past 2 a.m. by this point. I was as bored as humanly possible, and there hadn't been a customer in over an hour. I wondered if there were any other employees in the building. There had to be, I figured. They couldn't have a lone 20-year-old running the whole place by himself. There was some bald guy who looked like he could be a manager that kept passing by the front registers every few minutes. He had a key ring attached to his khakis with like 10 keys on it, and he was holding a small backpack-type bag in his hand. So I said, "Excuse me, are you the manager?" And he came over and asked if it was my first day on the job, to which I said it was my first night shift. He shook my hand without giving me his name, and asked me if I could go to the back warehouse of the store and organize the pallets. He said he'd watch the front. I didn't exactly know what that meant, but I'd figure it out. I walked towards the back of the store, and as I did, I saw him doing something to the entrance door of the store, like he was reaching for some switch on the side of it, as if he were locking it. I made my way into the back warehouse, where I saw a tall man who looked like he were 30, wearing a manager's vest that said wall bounce. He saw my apron and introduced himself as Rob, the night manager. I said, "Oh, I thought the guy in the front was the night manager." And he looked puzzled and said, "Who?" When I described that man from before, he asked me to show him who I was talking about, because he was the only manager on duty. We didn't even make it out of the warehouse before all the lights in the store turned off. Rob told me to wait in the warehouse while he checks out what's going on. I watched as he walked through the warehouse doors into the darkness of the store, with the only light out there being from the lights of the dairy coolers that were still on. I sat on a box on a pallet, and was on my phone trying to text any of my friends who could have been awake about what was happening, when I heard a door from inside the warehouse opening. It was on the other side of the warehouse, separated by the freezer and dairy fridge. There were 2 ways in and out of the warehouse back into the store. I still sat there, now with my ears perked up, listening for any sounds, when I heard quiet, slow footsteps getting closer, followed by a voice saying, "Hey kid, you in here?" But it wasn't Rob's voice. It was that bald guy's voice. I hurried out the warehouse doors into the store, but quietly. I jogged to the front of the store looking for Rob, but I couldn't find him. I called out his name, nothing. I grabbed my jacket and tried to open the exit door, but it wouldn't open automatically. So I tried to physically open it, but it was locked. I heard footsteps approaching from behind me, and I turned and almost screamed, but I realized it was Rob the manager. He flicked some lever or something on the top right of the door and unlocked it, and he said in a panicked whisper to hurry and get outside. He followed behind me. We left the store and he got right on the phone with the police, and I heard his whole conversation. He said he believed an armed man locked himself into the wall bounce and was probably trying to rob the place. I told him to tell the police that I think he was coming to harm me in the warehouse, which he relayed to the operator. He told me I should go wait in my car or leave. I'm sure because he didn't want the store to be held liable for anything if something were to happen. I went and sat in my car and just watched for a little while, and within 10 minutes there were at least 4 police cars outside the store. They all went inside for a while, and I didn't see whatever was going on, so I left. I didn't quit after that though. The next time I went into work, I was told all about what happened by my supervisor. The security footage showed that bald man circling the place, acting suspicious, checking if the coast were clear to do whatever he was planning to do after locking the doors. He cut the lights in the store, and the cameras showed him going straight to the warehouse where he told me to go. That's the scariest part to me, because if he were armed and robbing the place, he could have been on his way to put a gun to my head or something. The camera showed him leaving through the emergency exit in the warehouse way before the police arrived. In the end, I never worked an overnight shift again after talking to my boss, and I stayed at that job for another few months. I'm not sure if that man was ever identified. I used to work as a night restock worker at a supermarket in a somewhat rural town. The store was called Great American. It was the biggest and best supermarket in the area. My shift would be as soon as the store would close at 10. I'd work from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. the latest, restocking the shelves and organizing everything before the next operating day. I of course had the keys to the store for the after hours. It would be a team of 2, myself and one other, either Terry, Carter, or Alfonso. Tonight I was supposed to be working with Terry. I arrived to the store and let myself into the back where all the inventory yet to be stocked was. I started my work using the pallet jack to bring a whole pallet of boxes out to the shopping floor. I started with the bread and nuts aisle, rotating the older loaves in the front and putting the newer loaves in the back. Halfway through, I realized I hadn't seen Terry yet. I walked to the back area of the store where the inventory was, where we'd leave our belongings. He wasn't back there yet. I left the back door cracked open with a door stopper for him when he would show up. So I went back to work for another half hour, and with still no sign of Terry, I once again went to the back of the store. He wasn't in there, but I noticed the back door was shut. I assumed that meant Terry was here somewhere. I went to open the back door, and saw the door stopper was outside, which I thought was weird that he kicked it outside instead of bringing it in. I called Terry's name and it echoed through the room. He didn't call back, so I decided to call him. He picked up, sounding like he was in bed, and I asked him if he was at work. He said he wasn't coming in tonight because he was sick. Suddenly I got the chills. I told him someone kicked the door stopper off the door, and he said it could have just come undone itself. Nobody else was scheduled to work that night. I told him feel better, and we hung up. I wasn't sure if I was convinced that the door stopper came undone itself, because I kicked it under the door pretty tightly. I did a quick look around just to make sure no one was in the back of the store, and when I didn't see anyone, I went back to work, though I felt a slight sense of unease the whole time. I was stocking the remainder of the bread when I heard a loud sound echo from across the shopping floor. Okay, now someone had to be in here. I got off my knees and went to the middle aisle that intersected all the other aisles. I looked straight down the aisle and stood there for a hot second, and all the way on the opposite side of the store in the dairy aisle, a man dressed in black walked past the middle aisle, looking down in my direction. I felt my heart drop. It felt like that scene from the movie Signs where the alien walks past the birthday party. I had to think logically, that maybe this was someone else filling in for Terry's shift that our boss didn't tell me about. I started to speed walk down the center aisle and yelled "excuse me" very loudly. I looked to the left down every aisle I passed since he went towards the front of the store. In one of those aisles, he was waiting at the end of it, standing there fully facing my direction. When he saw me, he walked out of sight in the direction I was just coming from. I yelled "excuse me" again and started to run down that aisle to catch up to him. I didn't get a good look at his face yet. When I got to the front of the aisle by the cash registers, I looked down the direction he went, and I saw him all the way at the end by the bread aisle. Half his body was hidden behind the shelf. His mouth was hanging open, and he started to wave me over, but he didn't say anything. His face was freaking me out. I attempted one more time to speak to him and said, "Who are you?" And he disappeared behind the shelf. I wasn't being paid enough for this. I went outside to sit in my car and call my boss. He picked up and I told him there was some random freak roaming around the store. He told me to get him out of there if I can, or call the police to get him out. I was not going to attempt to physically remove a crazy person from the store, so I called 911. I waited in my car until a police car showed up. I greeted the officer and asked him to follow me inside. We walked around the place looking for the man, and we saw him at one of the aisles again, creepily standing there again as if playing a game. When the police officer commanded him to come here, he actually listened. He was put in handcuffs, and he was the strangest man I'd ever seen. He kept smiling and looking at me non-stop, licking his lips. He had huge bags under his eyes. The only words he spoke were when answering the police officer, saying he was looking for a snack. I didn't like the way he was looking at me as the police officer was walking him back outside to his car. It was this menacing, threatening smile that I haven't forgotten to this day. I continued my work after that. Needless to say, I never left any of the doors open again.